This is lesson 5-9, line plots. Here we have a line plot about the length of stag beetles. This is the data that was plotted on our line plot. Let's notice the parts of a line plot. We have a title that tells us what this line plot is about, the stag beetle lengths. We have our unit labeled across the bottom so that we know what these numbers mean. Its length in inches. Now, the numbers that go across our x-axis are scaled by looking at the data, finding the smallest number or minimum. 1.5 is the smallest number in the data. That's where we can start our line plot. We find the largest or maximum number in this set of data is 3.5. So that can be the last number on our line plot. Now, the numbers in between must be represented in a scale that has the same interval. Or, what am I counting by here? 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. So I'm counting by ½ inches, and my interval going across the bottom of my x-axis must be consistent with that pattern. Once I have my scale written in, I can plot the data. I look at the numbers above 1.5, and for each one I put an X above that measurement. 1.5 again, that gets another X. 1.5 again, there's my third X. 2, and so on. Now, let's look at the data and see what kind of questions we can answer by looking at the line plot. So, can you tell me, what is the insect measure that appears most often in a line plot? The measure that appears most often is 2 inches. It has the most X's above it. What is the measure of the longest insect? The longest insect in this data is 3.5 inches long. What is the difference in the measures of the longest and the shortest insect? The shortest one is 1.5. The longest insect is 3.5 inches. What's the difference between these two numbers? 2 inches. How many more insects measured 2 inches than 2.5? 2 more insects measured 2 inches than 2.5. Let's look at this line plot that we need to create in our math journals about backpack weights. And our unit, weight in pounds. Let's look at our number line here along the x-axis. What is it counting by? I see 4 through 10. And I notice between 4 and 5, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal spaces. This must represent 4 and 1/4, 4.5, 4 and 3/4, 5, 5 and 1/4, 5.5, 5 and 3/4, 6. Before we start to plot this data, we want to make sure that we understand the scale. What are the intervals? What is the scale counting by? We saw that this scale is counting by quarter pounds. So now I take my data and I go through. 4 pounds, put an X above 4. 6.5. I find where 6.5 is, and I put an X above 6.5. 7.5. 4.5. 7 1/4. 5 1/4. 9 1/4. 6.5, and so on, creating a line plot. Do you notice what a line plot does not include that you would see on a graph? Information going up along this side on the y-axis. Our line plot only includes data or numbers on a scale along the bottom on the x-axis. When reading or plotting a line plot, make sure that you understand what the scale and intervals are. When creating a line plot, be sure to include a title and label those units. See you in class for more line plots.